There are whole industries that are built around the idea of change and helping people be more effective and be more effective at work, be more effective at home, be more effective as a parent. And there's a whole kind of psychology that has supported what it means to create change. Most of the time, when people talk about change, they talk about changing behavior. If you just do things differently, if you practice the piano in a different way, you'll be more effective than if you do it the way you are. So you can correct the behavior. Sometimes on a coaching or even on a psychological level, it's about how do we change how we think about things, and if we just look at it differently, view things from a different perspective, that it will help us make a change. If we could just see it differently, then we will be able to behave differently. We'll be able to change. If we know that something is not working, then we'll be able to make a change. But we've seen that examples of that, for example, in smoking, that you can say to somebody, listen, smoking's not good for you. People know that, yet it doesn't change the behavior. So we've got all kinds of industries that really try to tackle this problem of the whole change thing. And then if you go from change to actual success, and not even just changing things, but to create more success, it's still the same underpinnings of how do you do that. And often what happens is we say practice. If you just practice, for example, 10,000 hours, you're going to be a great professional, whatever, pianist or athlete or whatever, then it's just practice. But if you're practicing the wrong way, then those 10,000 hours, practicing 10,000 wrong hours is not going to really help you be successful doing that. So on a behavioral level, that also requires people to be motivated. For example, so you could say, going to school or getting a degree or whatever is going to help you do something amazing. But then you see that people just don't do it. I had a friend of mine recently who I tried to help in his music career, and I showed him kind of the steps to what to do, and he didn't do it. So knowing what to do, even if it's the right thing to do, doesn't necessarily lead to success, because people don't actually follow through. So when you think about this whole idea about success, how does it actually happen? What's a kind of a foolproof way to make things happen? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over an idea with you about change and its construction and how it works, and how you might be able to create change instantly and permanently. That's usually not something that you hear very often, because normally you think about change as being part of some process. You learn, it's a learning process, it's a behavioral process, and the more you practice the new way of doing things, then the easier it'll be for you to win. So I'm going to take you through what I think is the most powerful way to create whatever it is, whatever outcome you want. And so I'm going to look at that with you now. Very, very often there is people have a desire to do something. So they want to, like I said, to get an education or whatever. And so I want to look at the construction of change, like the anatomy of change. And we break it down. We're going to break it down to look at its component parts. And then if you actually look at this, I'm going to give you an idea of how to be able to diagnose where you need to focus in order to get the change that you want. Now, in order to understand change, you have to understand one principal concept, and that concept is called causality. Causality is the thing that causes the thing to happen. So if you put hydrogen and two oxygens together, you're going to get water. It's only when you put the two together that you actually get the water. So it's the combination that creates the thing you want. And so we could call that causality, right? And when you do that mixture, of different components, you get something different. You create a change at that level. And so we're going to be looking at it in a similar way. Look at the idea that change is based on causality. And I'm going to suggest to you that there are many, many levels of causality. And the more difficult the problem, probably the deeper the level of causality, but not necessarily the case. But whatever change you want to create must be addressed at the level at which it's being created. In other words, if Peter keeps getting into an accident, it may well be that Peter is actually an alcoholic, and so treating the alcoholism is what you need to focus on, and not necessarily giving Peter lectures about how to drive and take him to driving school or whatever else like that. That's not going to really help, because alcoholism is actually the problem, and alcoholism may be a symptom of something else. So there may be a different problem. It will be that he's in some pain. He may be in pain emotionally or whatever. Maybe in pain physically, for example. In which case, the drinking really is just a way to manage the pain. It could be psychological pain, whatever else like that. So you can see that if you're trying to help someone not have accidents, for example, then teaching them how to drive better and be corrective on that level is not going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the levels of causality, and then we're going to say that as you get deeper and deeper, it'll give you more tools. It'll give you more of a sense of where to make sense. Okay, so we're going to start with the first level, which is data, which is just kind of like what you see around you. And let me pick an example. For example, Sue is a little girl, and she sees a lot of success and a lot of failure around her, and she notices that and somebody tells her that, when you grow up, if you go to school, you'll make more money. You'll be a success. And that's actually what happened to me in life. I had a lot of older people come to me, and they used to always say, well, school is really the thing to do. And I kind of took notice of that, and I went, oh, okay, that's an interesting idea. And for some people, they just hear it and it just kind of like sits there somewhere, and they don't do anything with it. But I had one on to the next step, which is content. So the first one's data, next one's content. Content means that you actually start to notice a relationship between, for example, what was said and what you see. So, for example, she heard this, like I did, heard this about school, and I looked around and I said, well, okay, so there's people over there who went to school, and then there are people who didn't go to school. And the people who went to school seemed to have better jobs. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because I used to look around at people who told me to go to school. They had terrible jobs, and porters and all kinds of stuff that I was like, oh God, I don't want any of those things. But they said, well, you want to have a happy life. You don't want to be like us, go to school. So I looked at that and I saw that there were a lot of people who, the kinds of jobs that I thought were interesting, all of those people had gone to school. So that takes us on to the next level, which, so just to back up a little bit, content really is about looking at and making meaning and making associations and drawing conclusions about the data that you've just seen. So it's like, people tell me that, and I look around like, okay, so there seems to be a relationship between those things. And what we do is we do this. This is how we create a hierarchy of understanding. And then once it gets entrenched, once we have enough, we create enough content around it, it starts to get a little bit more solid. But we need the next step, which is story level. Story level is that the things that we tell ourselves about the data and about the content that we're. So I noticed that people who that did better had the kind of jobs that I wanted, went to school. So the story that I created was, oh, okay, there really seems to be something to this thing that there really is. There seems to be really a relationship. I look and take a lot of data, and I can look and say, okay, there's a lot of credibility to this idea that what it is that you have seen and what it is that you've made an understanding of, that there's a story around it. Like, people who go to school tend to have better jobs, and so then that gets kind of locked in there. Okay, so once we have that, now we say, okay, so now let's set a goal, which is on the action level, which is the next level of causality. And the next level is to then say, okay, well, let me plan that. Let me think about schools to go to. Let me think about what subjects I might like, and this whole investigation thing that we do, because now it's predicated on this idea. We have a foundation here. Boom, this is the way it works. Going to school makes sense. I'm going to now create a plan to do that on an action level. Now, most of behavioral change happens on those levels. If you go to a coach, you say, well, I'm doing this behavior that, I'm smoking and I don't want to smoke. So then the coaching becomes about, okay, how do I help you stop smoking? On another level, it could be the story level that, smoking made me look cool. So maybe the story is wrong. Maybe the way in which I looked at it, go back up and say, well, okay, if I go back, I thought that smokers look cool, but now that I'm older, I can rearrange that. And that's what therapy does. That's what coaching does. You go back on a content level and say, well, maybe you saw a lot of people who looked cool and they were smokers. So therefore you got that understanding. You drew the conclusion that that's what it was. But on a coaching level, on a psychological level, you could look at those things and you could help people, what we call reframe their stories, and look at, and what a reframe really means is take that content that you have and rearrange it and create a different meaning out of that, so that the information becomes different, the way we look at it becomes different. And so that's where most things happen. And that allows people to have different behaviors, because now they can see, well, actually smoking doesn't make me cool. So what am I smoking for? It's not really getting me the kind of results, that I want in life. On that, I'm 40, and what do I need to impress my high school fellow students? So it becomes easier on a cognitive level. We'll do that. The next level is emotions. And emotions are more powerful than actions, because I might look at and recognize that being a smoker doesn't make me cool, but now I'm feeling, it becomes part of how I socialize. It becomes part of my everyday existence, and when stopping smoking creates an emotion, right? It creates physical reaction, which creates an emotion. The withdrawal, I can do that. So often the emotions that get generated, the fear that gets generated, actually can override the actions. Because if let's say, for example, someone is afraid to get on a plane, you can teach them how to go, get a ticket, whatever else like that. But as soon as they get ready to go on the plane, they go, whoa, I can't do this. So people get stopped on an emotional level, even though they can see for themselves, this is a good thing to do. They can see this really would work for me if I did this. But most people are not willing to tolerate the intense emotions that come up that one must deal with. So the emotions actually drive the behavior. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether or not it looks, if it makes sense for me to stop smoking or stop drinking and driving or whatever. It's like that. If the emotions are strong enough, they'll override the behavior. And most people won't work against their own emotions. And so on a coaching level, it's very, very difficult to get to that level of change, to help people feel differently about something. You'd have to work, you'd have to try something, you'd have to get to another level in order to be able to do that. So that's why a lot of times it gets stuck there, because people then start trying to process emotion and then try to reframe the emotion, see the emotion in a different way, create new content out of the story, and then by virtue all of that, be able to have new experiences, and then by having new actions which produce new emotions, and then you keep practicing the new behavior, and then eventually the reward system kicks in, so that you get enough pleasure from not getting arrested for driving, or being able to do something that was really that you felt was really difficult and challenging. But if you do this from a psychological perspective, it's going to be problematic, because that takes a long time to do what I just said, that process. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but I'm just saying that normally would be the way to do it. And people don't necessarily change their emotions without a new experience. It's very difficult to have a new emotion without a new experience. It's very difficult to have a new experience without new actions. And so they become kind of circular. So it becomes very, very difficult. Now, next level is belief. So on a belief level, belief is stronger than emotions, because if you actually change the belief, then the emotions change. So if you say, the pain that you're feeling, the withdrawal that you're feeling, actually is going to pass. And if you just keep it for 20 days, whatever like that, don't smoke, you're actually going to be better, and you're going to be healthier, and you're going to save money, and if the person actually believes that it's actually better, and that pain, so they take the pain, and the content level says pain is dangerous, pain is not something that one wants. It means that we need to back away. If they can have a different understanding, have a different belief about the pain, then they're able to move forward. But that requires a different belief around what's actually happening. And so if you can get to that level, and psychology can get to that level, coaching can get to that level, when the beliefs are things that people are really aware of. And if they're not aware of it on a subconscious or unconscious level, then it becomes very difficult for them to access that, which is why therapy comes into place. You can then begin to believe something different, begin to understand that you believe something on an unconscious level that wasn't necessarily conscious. So that moves coaching out of the realm. Coaching stops there, because coaching doesn't have access as a normal coaching process. It doesn't have access to unconscious thought. That's in the domain of psychology. So we kind of stop there in terms of coaching. Now let's we go on to psychology, and that's fine. It can take off there, and it can help move at the level of causality. The level of causality may be that a belief that is unconscious, or if it's subconscious, to make it conscious. And coaching can, if it's subconscious, can help a client, because they can help them become more aware and bring it into a more conscious realm, in which case then they can make decisions and create new content around it. You can't create new content if you don't have access to the content. That's the problem. So that's where some coaching could do that. A lot of coaching can't. Most of it focuses on the other stuff. Now, let's go on to the next level of of causality, which is intention. Intention is really, really powerful. It says, doesn't matter what's happening here. It's like, what is my intention now? So if my intention is to be healthy and I'm smoking, that can be much more powerful than anything else, because once you have a really clear intention, even if you don't know how to do it, the intention will take, you're traveling and you're going to travel around the world. You may not necessarily know how to get to every place. You can't plan everything out. Or you may even have fears. You may have, emotions around it. You may believe it's really difficult. You may even think it's hard to say that you believe it's impossible, but you may believe it's impossible, but then you rely on, let's say, spiritual or divine kind of faith that what you believe is actually limited, and that there's this other force that is more powerful than your belief. And if you can substitute your focus on the intention, creating an intention that's powerful, independent of everything else that you think, independent of everything else that you believe, independent of everything that you have ever known. If you can set an intention that sits outside of what you know, now you have access to something different. The beliefs will still be there. The actions will still be there. Everything will still be the same. Everything that we just said, which is a cause, will still be there. So that won't change. The difference is that the intention will help organize and override over time everything else. It will become the most powerful causality, access to causality that you can have, even given the power of the other stuff. So intentions are really, really important. So clarify your intention. Now, one intention could be to react to everything that's happened. Another intention could be to create something different.